Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our CPE for Lunch, Power of Excel and Power BI. I want to welcome Belinda Allen to our webinar, and we really appreciate you speaking with us today and presenting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So welcome, everybody. I'm Belinda Allen. We'll only spend a second on who I am, but I am the Business Intelligence and Training Program Manager for Ingevity, and we are a partner for partners. So we work with Maynard and the team there. So we kind of provide support to them. I've written a couple books on business intelligence and GP with my good friend Mark Polino. So those are available on Amazon if you just search Belinda. I am not the book about the purple cow. I am the one that has the BI books. So these are a little bit fun. The second one, the one with the green cover, also has a little bit of Jet Reports and a little bit of Power BI in it. Mark Polino and Sean Dord and I also have a podcast that we are getting off the ground, so that's kind of fun, MBS podcast for Mark, Belinda, and Sean. And thankfully, I am a GPUG All-Star and a Microsoft MVP for Power BI. So that's a little bit about me, more than you ever wanted to know, but I wanted to let you know why I was qualified to talk to you today about Power BI and Excel. So let's dig into what you're here for, Power BI and Excel. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about how Power BI and Excel work together to create a really nice way for you to get data back and forth, to share data back and forth, to create quick and easy visuals inside of Power BI in the cloud, or take data from Power BI and analyze it in Excel if you want to. But basically, there's some really nice symmetry between the two products, and we're going to be talking about that today. And we're going to have, we're going to be heavy on the demos, so I know that excites everybody. So we're going to dive in. Oh, I didn't even go through the agenda. Sorry. We're going to start inside of Power BI, and we are going to publish some Power BI reports from Excel. We're going to do this within Power BI. There are a couple different ways to do that. Then we're going to go into Excel, and we're going to talk about how do you publish information from Excel to Power BI. Then we're going to go back to Power BI in the cloud, and we're going to talk about and show how you could take data, your data sets in the Power BI cloud, and analyze them in Excel. I'm also going to show you a way you can use some Excel data to get some really cool Power BI functionality, and you could do it both in Excel and in Power BI. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the query editor and how they're basically the same, and they use the same formatting language or coding language, but don't let that scare you. We're going to keep this all pretty simple and pretty fun. So if you're an Excel user, you are going to have a good time today. So we're going to start with our first demo, which is publishing to Power BI from Excel within the Power BI desktop service. So at this point, I'm going to make the assumption that everybody has knows a little bit about Power BI. If you don't, you're going to get a little bit of introduction to it. So it's a dashboarding service, if you will. So it's basically a set of tools and services that enable you to create reports that provide you with quick insights to your data. And the data can come from any source, and it can be connected together in any way. So this is Power BI. This is like the home page. It's in preview now. I'm going to go to my workspace because this is a way that more people are familiar with. And we can have dashboards, we can have reports, we can have workbooks, which we're going to be talking about right now. And then we have data sets. So I'm going to go into workbooks. And this is using the term workbooks because we're referring to Excel workbooks. So we can extract data from Excel, or we can extract reports from Excel. And we're going to do this right now. So under workbooks, there is a create object in the top right-hand corner, right up here. And let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. So right there. And if you click on that create, then you got a couple different options there. And one of the things that I want to do, oops, I think I already messed myself up. And let me pull it back up. Sorry. zooming in sometimes gets me. So let's try this again. Power BI. There we go. All right. And sign in. I have a lot of aliases, so let's see if we can. Okay, so let's try this again. My apologies. So in the workbook space, what we're going to do now is, I took you to the wrong place. Down at the bottom, we have this get data. So we're going to go ahead and click on, in the bottom left, get data. And I'm going to try to zoom less so I don't make myself crazy. And we have a couple different options here on how we get data. So these are done basically through published information, like if you were to, let's say you use, some of you I think use QuickBooks. So there are some QuickBooks templates out there, so you can connect to those right away. Or if you wanted to connect to Outlook or some things like that, or if your organization builds out some of their own content packs, then you can connect to those. But we're going to focus on the right side, this create new content. And we could either get files from a database or from files. So we're going to get them from files because I want you to see how this works. And what we're looking at now, this is how you would get data from an Excel file. Now, it could come from a SharePoint site. It could come from OneDrive, either personal or business, or you can get it from your local files. And that's what I'm going to do now. So let me link out to my files here. And the first one I'm going to get is one that I will call, let me go to Manor, the one called customers. And once you select an Excel file, you're going to have two options. Do you want to import the data that's in that file, or do you want to upload the whole Excel file? And let's start with importing in the data. I'm going to go ahead and click on import. And what happens when I do that, and it's importing right now, is it's creating this data set for me called customers. And this customer file is nothing but, let me open it up on another screen. So it's opening up my Excel. And once Excel opens, you'll see this is nothing but a table of data. So it's a whole lot of data that is listed out in just a table form. You can see I have table tools up here in designs. So it's just a whole bunch of data that I might want to build Power BI reports for, or Power BI dashboards. So here's my data set right here. So now this is something where I could actually create a list of reports. So now if I go up to create and I choose reports, I can choose, I could either I pick whichever data set I want. I'm going to grab this one, which I just did 54 seconds ago, called customers, and click on create. And now I can very quickly and easily create my data set. So if I were to put in, let me stretch this out a little bit. If I were to come in and put in like salesperson code and let's say balance, I could see by salesperson the balance of what is owed. So you could do some visualizations that look like this. So here is my balance of customers by salesperson. And I can even come over and again do it by city instead. Let me take out the salesperson. So there it is by city. So you could start building out your reports in that fashion. And so that's how it would work if you brought in data. Now, I'm not as big a fan of that. I like to build out my reports using the desktop file of, or desktop version of Power BI. The desktop version is a free application that you can get from powerbi.com, and the desktop version has a lot more features that you could utilize. So you could actually go in and clean your data up a little bit more. So I prefer to use the desktop file, but you could bring the data right in if you wanted to and do your work right from here. That's perfectly fine. Let's go back to my workspace. I'm not going to save that file. And now this time I'm going to go back to data sets once again. I'm going to choose get data one more time. I'll choose from files. And this time I'm going to once again choose the local file, and I'm going to choose this fixed asset dashboard. Now this time I'm going to choose to upload the file. Now what's actually going to happen here is it's going to bring in that Excel file the way it's formatted. And this particular one happens to have in it, let me go to workbooks. There's my workbook now. This one actually happens to have a pivot table in it, or a series of pivot tables that look at my fixed asset data from Dynamics GP. So if I were to click on this, you'll notice that it's opening Excel online. So I don't even need Excel locally. So I've got Excel online, and I can see all of the tabs that are in my Excel workbook. So there's the report tab, here are the individual dashboards, and then here's a combined dashboard. This is one I actually got from Jet Report, and it's still interactive. Notice I could go to Alpharetta, Atlanta. My reports change depending on what I select. If I were to go in and select 2016 and grab a couple quarters, they're all going to change to be dynamic like that. This is just the Excel file in the way it is. And I could go through and edit this information by choosing edit if I want to, but this is the Excel service at its best. So this is pretty cool. I think a good use for this is if you have your financial statement that you just prepared for the month, you might want to upload it so that you have it constantly available to you no matter where you are. So if you're on the move a lot, you might want to look at it and analyze it more, so you could upload it and take a peek at it. So I always find that to be pretty darn cool, cool use of that. All right, so let's go back in. So once again, we're in our slide deck. You could see, again, we were looking at local files, and we brought data up, and we uploaded the entire file. Now here is a little bit more information I want to talk about this. So you can upload your workbook to Power BI. Good thing for that would be is if you you could create reports in Excel that you're used to, and you can view and edit them. And so that's pretty cool. And you could even pin some of the visuals down. We're going to be doing that shortly. Or you can just import the data and build the report automatically. Now, inside of Power BI service, one of the things you see here is updates happen every hour for OneDrive for Business. So let's talk about this for just a moment. If your data is in a flat Excel file, meaning it's not in the data model or anything, and it's on your local drive, then there's no way for Power BI to be able to refresh the data. You'd have to republish it each and every time. That would be how you refresh the data in your Power BI service. If, however, you save the file to OneDrive for Business, and I say business because if you're logging into OneDrive for Business, you're using Azure Active Directory, meaning you're using your Office 365 account if you have Office 365 or OneDrive, and then Power BI also uses that same login information, so it knows how to connect and refresh data. So every hour, it will automatically go and refresh all the data for you. So if you keep the file up to date in OneDrive, anybody who's using Power BI for that particular file, for that data, it's automatically going to have a refresh for you. And so I think that is a powerful feature. OneDrive Personal is a little tougher because it doesn't always use the same, doesn't always have the same credentials. You'd have to make sure they're exactly the same for that to work for you. So it doesn't work very well. But I do want to point out, if you do have Office 365 and you use SharePoint Online, the same thing will happen. If the data is updated in SharePoint Online, automatically every hour on the hour, it's going to automatically refresh for you. So I think those are both some really cool reasons for using it. So if you have one person just refreshing the data in OneDrive for Business that everybody is shared with, or SharePoint Online and everybody's using that same data set, it's going to automatically update for you. So there is definitely some big power there. Now I want to move on to using Excel and publishing from Excel to Power BI. So this time I am going to open up an Excel file here. So this is another file. I think this was also created by Jet Reports. The top 10 items by sales profit. And I just use theirs because it's nice and clean. Yep, this one is also Jet Reports. I could tell by the README file. All right, so I have this report pulled up where I have a table. This comes from a JET table listed right here. But I also have this nice, I've created this nice dashboard-like experience. And I want to be able to use some of these tools inside of Power BI. So one of the things that you would do is there is a download. You notice right here, Power BI. Well, actually, before I do that, let me show you this. If you have an Office 365 subscription, meaning that means you're always on the latest version. So one of the things I've started doing with that in Excel 2016, you can go to File, and there's a Publish button that will enable you to publish to Power BI. Now, it knows who you're logged in as, so it automatically knows what to do. And once again, you are presented with the same options. Do you want to upload the whole report to your workbook, or do you want to export the data? So I'm going to choose Upload. And then just for the kick of it, I'm going to go back to Publish and choose, it's still publishing. Got to wait, got to be a little bit patient. It's got to get to the cloud. And I'm going to choose to export. So now, if we were to go back into Power BI and we go to Workbooks, we see that particular workbook pulled up. So here is the Excel workbook. I'm going to close that out. And just like before, it is highly interactive. So I could do anything with it that I want to do with it and evaluate it accordingly. Now, this is a JET report, so it makes that plays a little bit differently. Normally, you wouldn't use a JET report to do this, but so refreshing might be a little bit awkward here. But the point is, you have this whole spreadsheet that you could do different things with. So now let's go back to my workspace, and I'm going to go to Data Sets. I also have my data set here. So if I were to, let's see, how do I want to do this? Actually, I'll create a report with it. That'll probably be the easiest way to see something. So I'm going to come in and find the data set that I just added. There it is. And I can create something this particular way as well. So this one actually had my pivot table on it, and then I had my sales table, and then I had an item table. So I had two different tables there. There's not a lot there, but I could come out here and add in my numbers from my dashboard. And let me come in and put item number on the axis. So you could create something like that as well. So I did basically the same thing, only this time I pushed to Power BI instead of pulled from Power BI. All right. So let's go back to Excel for a moment. Actually, let me close that one out, and let me open up one more. So this time I'm looking at year-to-date sales by country and state. And this time I want to do something a little bit different. Once again, this is a report that was created by JET. But let's say I want to use some elements of this. Maybe I want to use some of these visuals that I created in a Power BI dashboard, for example. One of the things that you would do is in PowerBI.com, there is a Power BI add-on for Excel, and you can click on that. And one of the things that you could do then is I could go to Pin Manager, and it is prompting me to do my Windows authentication. So let me log in as somebody else, because I've obviously logged into one of my other accounts. I'm going to log in as, there we go, with Ingevity. So this time I should be all logged in. Oh, I'm in the right one. So we'll figure that out in just a moment. Let me get a profile here. Sorry about that. Sign out. I was in the wrong profile. So let me come back in. That's what happens when you have so many aliases. All right, so now I'm signed into my Power BI account. All right, so now I'm going to go to the Pin Manager. And in the Pin Manager, I have lots of different options here. You notice I could see all of my teams. These are teams that we use within our own company. And then I have my workspace. If I were to go back into Power BI and I go to Workspaces, you're going to see all my same teams here. You see Belinda Details and Power to Learn, Ingevity, and so forth. And if I were to click here, you're going to see all of them again, Belinda's details. They're not in the same order, Empower to Learn, Ingevity, and so forth. So those are my teams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with just this big visual, and I'm going to put my mouse cursor all the way around and select the cells all the way around it. Now, I'm not actually selecting the visual itself. I'm selecting the cells where the visual is laying on top of. So I'm basically going to take a screenshot of whatever happens to be laying on top of those cells. So I select those cells, and I'm going to click on Pin, and it says, okay, where do you want this to go? And I'm going to put it in my workplace. And do I want to put it into an existing dashboard or a new dashboard? I'm going to create a new one, and we'll call this Mainer C. And I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And now if I go back to Power BI in the cloud, I'm in Chrome, I can see this new dashboard right here called Mainer C. And if I click on that, I see this visual. Now the visual is actually in Excel. It's not in Power BI, but I'm just using, or all the data and supporting data behind it, but I'm just using this to create my dashboard. I'm going to shrink that up a little bit so it's a little bit smaller. Let's go back over here. And then this time, I'm going to do the same, but I maybe want to include the pivot table that's included in this. I can't believe that pivot table dropped from my name for just a moment. I'm going to choose Pin to pin that down. Again, I wanted to go to my workspace. I wanted to go to the existing dashboard, and I've selected that, and I'll click OK. So once I come back to my dashboard, I now have this included. Now, you notice that I am clicking and nothing is happening on here. That's because this visual is nothing but a screenshot, like a picture of the cells that are included in there. So you want to keep that in mind. So if I were to come back in here, this still really is something that I have. So actually, let me keep that okay. Let me change this from US to Canada. And let's go back to Power BI. And you notice that these stayed static. There's no way to refresh them. So I would have to re-add them in again. So you want to be careful about what kind of filters you're putting on, because you're going to you really don't have filtering ability inside of the dashboard anyhow. So you want to be careful about that. So that's kind of like a twofold thing. But I think, personally, I think this is one of the really cool things about Excel and Power BI. Okay, so a couple things that I want to point out here. Standalone version from 2016 or 2019 will have the publish button, but on Office 365 subscriptions, this just started being able to publish from local files just in 2017. The standalone, you do need to publish from a saved OneDrive or a SharePoint Online. So it has to be OneDrive for Business or SharePoint Online if you want to be able to share those. If you're using a OneDrive account, you have to sign into OneDrive and Office and Power BI. They all have to be the same account. You saw the problem I was dealing with there. So that was something that was giving me a little bit of hindrance. And you can't publish anything that has encrypted passwords or a blank worksheet. So that sounds obvious, but wanted to point that out. And let's see, if modern authentication in Power has to be enabled within Excel. So let's go back to Excel for, Excel for just a moment. So there are a couple other things in here that you could see. We have our pin manager where we could see everything that is connected. So if I wanted to update it, I can highlight one of these. Let me select both of them and I'll update. And now the dashboard should work. Yep, we're looking at Canada now. So I have to manage this. I'm doing basically this push. I'm updating this screenshot from here. So I wanted to show you that. We also have the ability to look at what data were connected data inside of Power BI and build some things for the dashboard if we want to. So you can see all of my data here so that I could build something else out. And this is another way you can control dashboards if you want to. All right, so that is all pretty nifty. the slide deck that Christine's going to send out, it does have this information in there. I do want to point out, after you install the Power BI add-on, you do have to do a hard reboot of your machine. And don't be freaked out if it says, hey, you need to download. There is an option underneath the bottom that says I've already downloaded it. But so if it doesn't see the latest version, it will probably prompt you to download again. Now let's do a demo of analyzing data that's in Power BI into Excel. Now there's a couple of things I want to point out about looking at data in Power BI. So let's go back to my workspace and to the data sets again. The first thing I want to point out, now this really isn't an Excel thing, but I do want to point this out because a lot of people don't know it exists. So I have the customers that I imported that, remember that table from right at the very beginning. If you click on more options, one of your options is Get Quick Insights. And if you click on this, then Power BI is going to use a little bit of machine learning and some intelligence to look for trends and look for outliers to those trends. It doesn't know what your data is, doesn't care what your data is, but it's going to try to find trends just as well. Now, frequently, I find that GP users do not tend to find a lot of insight that they were looking for because they're familiar with their data. But every now and then something will surprise them. Had a customer who was thinking of letting their only outside salesperson go. We ran this and we found out that the outside salesperson really outsold everyone else in one particular product line. So instead of letting them go, they said, you control this product line for everybody and everyone else does everyone else and all the other products. And it seemed to benefit everybody involved. But all of these visuals that you're seeing here are actually things that happen by looking for trends. Now, so I guess Gil is a location. So it looks like there are more variations in cities. So 33 cities seem to get sales out of that location called Gil, as opposed to whatever this one is. So I'm not super familiar with the data. So and the names of the data. So actually, I think this actually comes from NAB data. So these are probably foreign names. That's probably why I'm not that particularly familiar with them. But I could learn a little bit about some of these things. Oh, here's an interesting one. So there are more currencies used from the Gil location than there are the other locations. So this must be definitely much more international. And if this is something that's important to me or I want to monitor it, or actually, let's use this credit limit by region. You could just simply click on that push pin and add it to an existing or a new dashboard. I'm going to look for, where is my dashboard? Oh, I guess I don't have one out there for that yet. So I'm going to just call this one Maynard 2. All right. So now in my workspace, I have this new dashboard. Not sure why the Maynard C one didn't show up there, but all right, so we got that. I wanted to show you that. The other thing I wanted to show you is once you have your data in Excel, you can then analyze the data, or once you have the data in Power BI, you can dump it back to Excel to do analyzing. Now, there are some limitations to this. So the first thing, let's go back to this customer one. And actually, instead, let's do the financial one. I'm going to click on the ellipsis here for this particular data set, Power BI Financial, and I'm going to choose Analyze in Excel. And it's going to prompt me to where do I want to install it. And this actually will install what's called an ODC file, which is a Windows file for Open Database Connectivity. Close that out and open up. Oh, there we go. Let's open that up. And the ODC file is, what that does is that actually understands the connection and the links between where the data is stored and the Excel file and how to get to the data. And I just need to enable the security that that path is safe. So I'm going to go ahead and click on enable. If you're using GP and you use the Excel refreshable reports, a lot of them will have all of the Excel refreshable reports will have an ODC file that you could use as well. And if you double click on it, it'll default to open up in Excel. Now, because we're analyzing the data in Excel, it opens up to a pivot table format, and it has all of my queries or tables in Power BI listed below. Now, there is something I do want to point out. I'm going to put the account number in rows. I'm going to put the account description in rows. And one of the things that I want to point out is that numbers that if you pulled in a number in your database into Power BI, like this is credit, which came from the credit from the GL, it's telling me that I can't place it there. And the reason why it's doing that is it thinks that credit is a text field. So the only time you could use a number here is if you're using a DAX field or data analysis expression field. So it requires DAX for that. So let's quickly do a DAX field real fast. So I'm going to come into Power BI. And I'm opening this up, and we're going to be saving this for later. Actually, might be better if I open one in particular. Here we go. Sales quantity and amount. So let's open this one up. Meanwhile, I'll close that. So if you want to just do a pivot table that looks like a table, then that works for you. Other than that, you do need to invest in learning DAX, data analysis expression, inside of Power BI. So in this particular case, I've created I'm going to create in Power BI a couple of expressions here. So I've got margin costs and some of those. Those are calculations. Let me go through, and I'm going to create the cost and the sales to get net profit. And that might exist out there, but I don't know that it does. So I'm going to get actually gross profit. I'm going to take the sales minus the cost to get gross profit per item. So to do this, I'm going to go to the modeling tab, and I'm going to choose new, I didn't want new column. Bear with me, sorry. I want to get a, I want either one of those. So let me go with my first instinct. Sorry. Never question your first instinct. Okay, and I'm assuming that everybody is stunned silence because I haven't heard a question yet. Or either that or I'm overwhelming you. Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm just going to go and get some data from my GP. So I'm going to go to my local GP and SQL Server and connect. This is the desktop version I was talking about earlier. I'll put in the name of my SQL Server and the name of my database. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And once I get that done, I'm going to look for the view that's called Sales Line Item. So I'll get that. And I'm going to let me just go in and do a little bit of editing. This will set us up for the next demo that I'm going to show you, or a demo, not the next one, but one shortly thereafter. So I'm going to just do a little bit of cleanup here. I don't want all these files, so I'm going to come in and click on Choose Columns. I don't want all these columns. There are 564 columns, so I'm going to just say, show me the SOP type, the sales type, whether it's an invoice and so forth. I want the invoice number, item description, quantity. And I'm going to just grab unit cost, unit price, and I'll figure the rest out. Customer number, and that's all I'm going to get for right now. I'll click OK. So I have just a few files. The data types are all set. I'm going to make this simple for us right now, and I'm only going to grab invoices. I will click OK. And I'm going to click on Close and Apply. So now I have those fields that I could work with. Now, if I were to upload this to the Power BI desktop file the way it is, these are all fields that came from my my data set. So if I try to analyze those in Excel, then it wouldn't work. And you're probably thinking, why would I want to analyze it in Excel if I can have access to it? Well, some people that you share the file with might not have access to the SQL Server or might not have access to the original information. And it's just a way to be able to analyze some of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my item number, and I've got my quantity, and I've got my unit cost and unit type. So I've got all this pulled out right here. And let me make this a little bigger so you guys could see what I'm doing. Go into Format, go into the grid, and let me make the font bigger so that you could see it much more easily. Okay, good. So these are number fields now, but they might not be number fields later. So if I want to get the unit or the total cost, I need to get the unit price, or I could do gross margin by items and then multiply it, or I could take unit cost times quantity and unit price times quantity and then subtract the two. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually go in and do a want a new, I'm going to do new measure. Okay, so I'm going to come in. I've got under measure. Actually, I really don't want either one of those. This version updates every month, so sometimes keeping track of it is a little bit tough. And all right, we'll do new measure. What the heck? Okay, so I'm going to call this actually, I keep thinking to myself about how I want to do this. I'm going to go back and do new column. Okay, sorry, I don't mean to make you guys crazy. So I'm going to call this one total cost. And the total cost, notice this is very similar to the Excel experience. The total cost here would be the unit cost. If I start typing in unit, I see the field right there. So it's very similar to working in a table in Excel, times the quantity. And that takes care of that one. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the commit button. And now over here on the side, we have the total cost listed right here. So we have that where we can utilize that in our particular field. All right, so I'm going to come back here. And I'm going to do the same thing again, create a new column. And this time I'll call it total price. And in the total price, what I'm going to do is do the unit price times the quantity. This gives you a tiny little bit of DAX fill, and I will select that. Now I'm going to come back in and add both of these to that same sheet, so I have those listed. Now I'm going to come in, and this time I'll just do a measure, which is going to be just a formula, and the measure is going to be the gross margin. And the gross margin will be my total cost. Oops. The sum of my total cost, or total price, minus the sum of my total cost. And so now I've got some DAX formulas here, some DAX numbers, so that I can actually, and I hope I did not knock myself out again, so I can actually pull that in, and I can utilize that particular field as well. So now that we have that done, I'm just going to do a quick save. We'll call this, all right, so I'm going to come in and just publish this now to the Power BI service, and I'll publish it to my workspace. Again, you see all my teams there. That's because I'm on the professional version, or the paid version of Power BI, which I should point out is only $9.95 a month. So it's, in relation to a lot of things, it's really inexpensive. So now that I'm here, there's my, I think this is the one I just created. If I click on that, yep, I can see my data here. Now I'm going to go back in this time, go to the data set once again. Here's my test data that I just imported. You can see the time is there. This time let's go to Analyze in Excel again. Notice it's creating that ODC file for us. So it does install that file on your local Excel. And I'm going to go ahead and open that up.
While we're waiting for that to open, I just want to let everyone know the handout is now available in your panel if you'd like to download that.
Cool, thanks. All right, so now, because this was done, the gross measure was done as a DAX formula and not just a column added, you could see gross margin is now something I could put in values. And I have my item and my item description. So now that's something I could use. And if you're a pivot table person, or if you've ever seen me do pivot tables, I always put it in tabular and I always stop showing. So now I can summarize and add it up. So now that's a number that I could actually use. So the data has to be done within DAX in order to get the data. So actually that would be a bigger extension of the question that was just asked. Why did I do it as gross margin? Because now it's a formula. DAX or Excel recognizes, hey, this is a numerical number because it's receiving the information from the formula itself, and the formula was a numerical formula, so that's how that's working. So there's a lot in DAX to learn, but that's one way that you could do some additional analysis in Excel if someone was interested in Excel. But again, if you do that publisher area, you want to make sure that I do have the steps. You go to Analyze in Excel. Just be alert to the fact that it's going to install it in your local Excel. And again, you want to do DAX measures because it does, and basically the reason for that is it doesn't aggregate, which means it doesn't sum everything up for you. So you have to put it in that way. All right, and if you do that, just be careful that you don't create a circle, meaning I have my data in Power BI, I have my data in Excel, I publish it to Power BI, I analyze it in Excel from Power BI, I create some pivot tables, which I then pin back to Power BI because then you have this crazy circle that you're dealing with, and the regular Excel data refresh will fix that for you. All right, so the next thing I want to show you is how you can get data if it's in a series of folders. So I'm going to pull in my my little Excel or my Windows Explorer folder here. And you can see I have this folder called Sales. Whoops, I don't want those three in there. Let me cut those out. Get rid of those. I only have 2 cities now in there. And then in my new Sales, I have 3 other cities. So we're going to start with this particular folder. So I'm going to start by copying this path. And what we're going to do, and I'm going to get this from this local drive here. I'm going to go in and choose Get Data. And this time, under File, I'm going to choose Folder. Now, by doing this, I have to make sure that everything that's in this folder is formatted the same way in Excel, meaning all the columns are the same and all of the names of the columns are the same. And this is something you want to use if you want to keep just dumping data in from a file. So in this particular case, this scenario would be we have stores in each city, several stores in each city, and the retail, our point of sale system gives us these static CSV files of the data. Another great example of this that I've seen used by GP and VP Jen Koons is she takes her Twitter analytics and she just dumps them into a file. They're formatted exactly the same, and then she's able to build reports off of them. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And what's going to happen here is it's going to show me all the files that are out there. And just like we saw in the Explorer file, there's only Oakland and Portland, and you can see them listed there. And you can also see all the metadata associated with that file, meaning when was it done last and so forth. Now, one of the things that newer Power BI does is it enables me to combine them together. And I could then choose Edit or Load. And I'm going to choose Edit, and it's going to open up the Power BI file, or Power BI Query Editor. And it automatically knows, hey, these are the combined files, so I can see all the rows, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And when the Query Editor opens, and sometimes it opens up behind. There it is. I can now see there are 5 columns in each of the Excel file. And if I choose on source name and load more, I should be able to see the others. Yeah, so Oakland and Portland, there's lots of information there. I have the source file name, the city it came from, the date of the file, the sales amount, and the store ID. Now I could get rid of this source name because remember it's applying all those steps. And I'm just going to choose close and apply now. And while that's applying, as soon as it applies, we'll create a new spreadsheet for it. And now what I can do, let me open up the sales. I could come in and say I want to show my cities. And actually, let me do a different format for this. Whoops. I'm going to come in and do, no, I still don't like that either. So let's just do a big old table here. And let me make the font bigger. Okay. So let's see, I've got my sales and my store ID. So let me stretch that up. I don't like the way that's looking. So let's also put in city before it. There we go. All right. So I could see city, store ID, in sales, in total sales in my table. And if I kept adding, I could do a little bit more. Like I could come in under date and get rid of, let's just show the year. Get rid of the day. So here it is by year, each store by year, and so forth. So what I want to show you now, I'm going to get rid of the year again. If we were to go back to our files here, these are just CSV files. I'm going to take these 3 new stores. I have new files, and I'm going to paste them in. So in that same folder where we just had 2, we now have 5 with 3 new cities: San Francisco, Seattle, and Tacoma. So what I'm going to do is just come up and refresh the data. And it's refreshing data from both my SQL Server and from the files there. And it's doing Oakland and Portland. Oh, look, here's Seattle, Tacoma, and where's I guess it did San Francisco without me noticing. All right, so now automatically, because I just added data to that file, that is now updated as well. And so this is I think this is a really cool use. If you get data from a source in a consistent format, you could just use a file folder to be able to upload that. And again, if it's something you wanted to happen automatically, you could put it in a OneDrive or SharePoint Online and then build it out in Excel that way, and it'll automatically go through and refresh. So, and one of the cool things too, if it's in OneDrive for Business or SharePoint Online, well, definitely OneDrive for Business, and you have that Excel file out there. If you just dump the data to the folder, Power BI doesn't even need the Excel file to be refreshed. What will happen is every hour it goes and looks at the Excel file and it says, okay, what is your source? And I want to go and refresh from where your refreshable data is. So because if you're using this, because we did this query editor like this, it knows where to go and get the data. So it'll automatically go to the folder and get all new data, even if the Excel file is not updated. It's just using Excel as a conduit to connect to the data. So I think that is, this is one of my favorite things to show. I love it. And again, you could see how I just did this one from the folder. So, all right. Let's see. So the get data from folder does not work with Excel files properly. They have to be a CSV or a text file for that to be able to work. There is a complicated way to make it work with Excel files if you want to go into M programming language, which is a little tough, but you can do it if you want to. And there's the link. It's in the handouts if you want to give that a shot. And if you're in Excel, the get and transform, you also want to make sure when you're editing that you remove the rows with all of the column names. So for example, looking at this particular file, we have Oakland and Portland, and it took the headers from Oakland, So the headers from Portland just became a row. So if you went in and said where the city does not equal the word city, it'll automatically get rid of all those for you. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. And again, that's one of my favorite features. Now, that being said, let's take a look at what we just did. And let's extend it beyond this from what we did in the Power BI desktop file and extend it to Excel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and open up the editor here. And I'll show you what I mean by, let me go into sales, and I'll show you what I mean by getting rid of the city, because I could easily do it here as well. So there's not going to be a city called city, or there wouldn't be sales called sales. So I'm going to just do it from city. I'll click on the drop-down list. I'll use a text filter, and I'll say does not equal, and I will manually type in the word city and click OK. And that way I'll ensure if the header's duplicated, it won't be part of that. Now what I'm going to do is if I were to go up into View on the menu option at the top in Advanced Editor, all of those applied steps that we've seen, this is how they look when they're in the M language. So here we have all of this in the M language, and it's pulling it all out. It has the Excel file path. So if I move the file, I could just open this up and move it. And then I have all of the other information. Everything that I do gets listed here, including filtering rows, which is the last one we just did, where we filtered rows and we said get rid of anything where the column for city doesn't equal the word city. And the only thing I want to point out about the M language is it always references the name of the row right before it. And so this time, this filtered rows, it starts with right after the removed columns, the # removed columns, and you can see the name of this column is called # removed column. So let me close this back up, and let's do one more thing, just so you can get a feel for it. Let me come in. I'm going to take the sales amount here, and I'm going to change this from fixed decimal to, I don't want to do that. Don't know which one I want to do because they're all looking good. Let me change the date so that, you know what I'll do? I will add a column. I'm going to highlight the date, choose add columns, and let me create one where it just puts the year out there. And now I have inserted year, and I'm going to change this to text so it'll act like text. So now if I go back into my M language here, I now have two more things at the bottom, inserted the year and changed the text type. So I'm going to copy all of this M code and click OK or done. And I'm going to go back and get out of the query editor altogether. And you're going to notice that the year will now appear over here on the right. So I can put in the year. This is actually a pretty big file. There are actually a lot of pretty big files. So I could even come in and put the year in above. So now I have it sorted by year. All right, so let me come into Excel and create a new Excel worksheet. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Data, and Get and Transform is where we have the query editor. And the query editor, again, is the same for both Excel and Power BI. And this time I'm going to come in and I'm going to choose Get Data, and I'm going to choose Other Sources, and I'm going to say do a blank query, meaning I will manually control the query right as I go along. So the Excel query editor, open on another screen. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is go to the same place I did before, View and Advanced Editor, and I'm going to just paste in everything I just copied and click OK. And did I miss something? What did I do? Oh, hang on. Let's see. Sample file. Where is that? Okay, so somewhere, oh, right in here is where that worked out. It was, the error is invoking in this function where we add a column. Transform from sales. Get rid of that. you could work your way through everything. Oh, well, there we go. We'll do it this way. So that wasn't a very good example to show you. But basically, you can see it did copy everything. I just had an error there. So, and this is going to happen occasionally because Power BI uses a newer query editor than does Excel. So you want to keep that in mind. So we're going to call that a happy accident and say that was just the way we had intended it. All right. So you could go to the query editor and get to it. And here's the warning I gave you. Not all Power Query features in Power BI are available in Excel. I'm not sure if Excel has the month name or not anymore, but that was an example of that. And that brings us right to the end with 3 whole minutes to spare. Were there any other questions that came across?
We don't have any other questions.
I know that was a lot of information, and if you're new to Power BI, it might feel like a lot, but it's something you could definitely work and grow your way into. The biggest thing about this webinar today, though, is really understanding how Power BI and Excel do use a lot of the same feature sets and tool sets so that you can become very comfortable with one if you know the other. And it uses a lot of the same elements to it. For example, let me pull up this sheet here, which probably is not a good example. So let me just pull up the Oakland sales. The DAX, the data analysis expression that I used, you could use it in Excel as well if you use the Power Pivot feature. So if I were to go into Power Pivot, and let me actually change this to a table. So format this as a table. And now go to Power Pivot. Oops, save as. We'll save this as an Excel table. There we go. All right, so now if we go to Manage, we can open up something called Power Pivot, and we can get the data from, let's see, existing connection. I really want it to be the data that's listed right here. So let's call this is Oakland, don't see Oakland. You know what, we'll just get it from one of these. Bad example. All right, so let's go to one of the other ones. Power Pivot, this is what happens when you just decide on a whim, hey, I'm going to try something else. All right, so let's go to existing connections. Do we see Oakland? No. Let's find Oakland here. Oh, I was looking for an ODC on that one, so that's not what I wanted. Sorry, I'm mumbling to myself. Some of you are probably going, hey, Belinda, it's right there. Come on. There we go. And let's get it from an Excel file. Oakland, there we go. Get rid of Oakland. All right, so let's try it again. And next. So once I get it in here, I could do other filters if I want to, but I'm going to just choose Finish. And then once it's in here, you could also add some data analysis expressions. So everything that I showed you is reusable in Microsoft applications in more than one space. So a lot of people don't realize that, but it certainly is. So there are a lot of things that you could do. You could create basically some calculations using DAX right from this particular screen. That being said, we are a couple minutes over. I appreciate everybody's time and attendance, and I hope that you found something useful that can benefit you in your work. And I really appreciate you taking the time to invest in yourself by increasing your knowledge. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Belinda, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.